Hello everyone, Dr. Jamnadas here. Today, we're diving into something that might sound unusual, but is incredibly important when it comes to understanding how fasting works. I'm going to share with you some strange signs that you might notice in your body when fasting is actually working in your favor. These aren't the typical signs like rapid weight loss or a suddenly flat stomach. We're talking about subtle changes that signal your body is going through deeper metabolic shifts. Before we get into the details, if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more valuable content like this. And if you find this video helpful, don't forget to share it with your friends or family. Now, let's get back to what really happens when fasting starts working its magic in your body. At first, fasting doesn't announce itself with dramatic changes like losing weight overnight. That's not how biology works. The changes are much more subtle and they can easily go unnoticed. In fact, many people assume that nothing is happening at all. They feel like their efforts are in vain. But in reality, the most profound changes are already underway. These early shifts don't always make a grand entrance. But trust me, they are laying the foundation for bigger changes to come. Here's a crucial point I want to emphasize. Fasting doesn't heal your body simply because you're eating less. The real healing happens because fasting changes your hormonal environment. Let's talk about why this matters. When insulin levels are high, your body is in a storage mode, always ready to hold on to energy. But when insulin levels drop, that's when the body shifts gears, switching from storing energy to burning it. This hormonal shift is what creates these unusual signs that you'll start to notice as fasting begins to take effect. One of the first signs that fasting is working involves hunger, but not hunger in the way you might expect. It's not about hunger disappearing entirely. It's about hunger becoming more manageable and calm. At first, you may still feel hunger, but it's not frantic or urgent. You won't feel shaky or irritable. Instead, it's a quieter kind of hunger. This is a clear signal that your insulin has dropped and your body has switched gears. When insulin is high, hunger is a force to be reckoned with. It's urgent and uncomfortable, pushing you to eat. But when insulin drops, hunger becomes more optional. You're no longer controlled by it. That shift in how hunger feels is one of the first things you might notice when fasting starts working. But that's not the only sign. The next one is mental clarity. People often describe this as a fog lifting. When fasting is working, people say they wake up feeling clearer, more focused, and less anxious. And this isn't just in your head. It's not psychological. It's metabolic. When insulin drops and ketones begin to rise, the brain switches from using glucose as its primary fuel source to burning ketones. This switch is a cleaner, more efficient fuel for your brain. As a result, you experience reduced brain inflammation, stabilized neurotransmitters, and a clearer mind. This is why many people say, I can think again after fasting for a while. It's not just the brain that's benefiting. Another sign that fasting is working is a noticeable reduction in bloating. Now, don't get confused. This isn't fat loss just yet, but rather a reduction in bloating. You'll notice that your abdomen feels softer, less tight. This is a sign that gut inflammation is improving. Fasting gives your gut a break from constant digestion. When you stop eating all the time, the gut lining starts to repair itself, intestinal permeability improves, bacterial balance begins to reset, and gas production decreases. These are some of the earliest signals that your gut is healing. Now, let's talk about cravings. When fasting begins to work, you'll notice a shift in your cravings. Sugar cravings weaken, and the urge to snack fades. This doesn't happen because you're suddenly forcing yourself to be disciplined. It happens because insulin and dopamine signaling are starting to normalize. When insulin levels are chronically high, the brain signals for fast energy, often in the form of sugary foods. But as insulin stabilizes, the brain no longer has that urgent need for sugar. This is why many people are surprised to find that they no longer crave sweets as much or at all. Along with cravings, sleep quality tends to improve. You may fall asleep faster and wake up feeling more refreshed even before you start losing any weight. The reason for this is that fasting helps normalize insulin and cortisol rhythms. Eating late at night or constantly snacking messes with your body's natural circadian signals. But when fasting aligns with daylight hours, it helps reset your internal clock. Melatonin improves, and you sleep more deeply. This is another early sign that fasting is having a positive effect on your body. The last sign I want to touch on in this part is a boost in energy without needing stimulants. You might notice that you don't rely on coffee as much as you used to. This is because your body's mitochondria are becoming more efficient. When you stop relying on sugar and start burning fat for fuel, your energy becomes steady and stable. It's no longer dependent on glucose spikes and crashes. This is another sign that your body is adapting to fasting and that it's working. These are just a few of the initial signs that fasting is beginning to work. It's important to understand these early shifts because many people give up before they notice them. They might expect dramatic weight loss, but they're not seeing it right away. What they don't realize is that the body is doing deep metabolic work behind the scenes. If you're patient and stick with it, these changes will build on each other, and before you know it, the weight loss and other physical changes will follow. So, why does fasting work in this particular order? Why do these signs appear the way they do? Well, there's a very specific reason these changes happen in the sequence that they do. And understanding this is crucial if you want to stick with fasting and see long-term benefits. Many people quit fasting too early, thinking they're not seeing results. But the truth is, the body is working hard behind the scenes, making foundational adjustments. Understanding this process is key to staying committed. Most people enter fasting with the expectation that the first sign they'll see is rapid fat loss. But biology doesn't work that way. Your body doesn't go straight to burning fat first. Instead, it focuses on fixing your body's signaling systems before it starts tackling fat storage. The first system that changes when you begin fasting is insulin signaling. Insulin is a master hormone that regulates energy balance in your body. It tells your cells whether energy is abundant or scarce. When insulin stays elevated for prolonged periods, fat, particularly visceral fat, is locked in place. The body's priority is to bring insulin levels down safely before anything else can happen. That's why the first changes you'll notice are related to hunger, not fat loss. Early on in a fasting routine, insulin levels fluctuate, which is why hunger feels so urgent and uncomfortable. When insulin spikes and crashes repeatedly, it makes you feel hungry in an uncontrollable way. But as fasting continues and insulin levels stabilize, hunger becomes much more predictable and manageable. The body is no longer in a state of constant energy storage. It starts to function in a balanced, stable manner. This shift in hunger is often the first sign that fasting is working. It's a sign that your body is beginning to regulate its insulin levels and is no longer constantly in a storage mode. It's a shift towards metabolic stability. This is a good thing because it means your body is healing even if it doesn't feel like it at first. After insulin stabilization, the next major change happens in the brain. The brain is highly sensitive to inflammation, and chronic high insulin and blood sugar levels increase neuroinflammation, which can impair cognitive function. But as insulin decreases and ketones begin to rise, the brain gets a new fuel source, ketones. These are a cleaner, more efficient fuel for the brain than glucose. As ketones increase, brain inflammation reduces, neurotransmitters stabilize, and mental clarity improves. This is why so many people report feeling sharper, more focused, and even more relaxed after a few days of fasting. The brain has switched to a more stable, cleaner fuel source, and this improves cognitive function. Another key sign of fasting working is the improvement in gut health. When you constantly eat, your gut is in a perpetual state of digestion and immune activation. This prevents your gut lining from healing. But when you fast, your gut gets a break. Tight junctions in the gut lining start to restore, and this leads to a reduction in bloating. Bloating is often one of the first signs that your gut is healing. While fat loss hasn't occurred yet, the gut is undergoing a process of repair. This is why many people notice their bellies feel softer and less tight after just a few days of fasting. Cravings are also another early indicator that fasting is beginning to work. Many people experience a decrease in their cravings for sugar and processed foods. This happens because the body's insulin and dopamine signaling begin to normalize. When insulin is high, the brain craves fast energy sources, which typically come in the form of sugar. But as insulin levels drop and stabilize, the brain no longer demands sugar. This is a powerful sign that your body is adjusting to the new metabolic rhythm. As cravings decrease, sleep quality starts to improve as well. Many people report falling asleep faster and waking up feeling more refreshed, even before they've seen any weight loss. This happens because fasting helps synchronize circadian rhythms. Insulin and cortisol levels normalize, which can improve sleep quality. Eating late or snacking frequently disrupts circadian rhythms, but fasting aligns with daylight hours, improving melatonin production and promoting deeper, more restful sleep. One more sign that fasting is working is an increase in energy levels. Without relying on stimulants like coffee, people often say that they feel more energized throughout the day. This is due to mitochondrial function improving. When the body starts burning fat instead of sugar for energy levels stabilize. You don't experience the usual energy crashes that come from relying on glucose. The energy you get from fat burning is steady and sustained rather than a spike and crash cycle. These are all signs that your body is responding positively to fasting. They might not look like dramatic weight loss or an immediate transformation, but they're critical first steps in the healing process. And if you quit fasting before you experience these signs, you could be missing out on the deeper metabolic shifts that are setting the stage for lasting change. Remember, it's not about instant results. It's about setting the foundation for long-term health and healing. Now, let's delve deeper into the specific role that visceral fat plays in this process. Many people tend to get discouraged early on because they're not seeing significant changes on the scale, but this is where understanding how your body responds to fasting becomes crucial. Visceral fat doesn't announce its changes by simply showing up on the scale. Instead, it reveals itself in different ways. Changes in your waist size, your posture, your breathing, and even metabolic markers are the true signs that visceral fat is starting to shrink. Visceral fat is a particularly dangerous form of fat. It surrounds your organs, the liver, pancreas, and intestines, and releases inflammatory chemicals that disrupt your body's systems. This fat is largely driven by elevated insulin levels. So when you begin fasting and insulin levels drop, the body starts to break down visceral fat. However, this process doesn't show up as immediate weight loss. The body has to go through a series of stages before this fat starts to be released. One of the first subtle signs that visceral fat is shrinking is a change in how your abdomen feels. Initially, you might not notice a decrease in size, but you'll likely feel a sense of softness or less tightness in your belly. This is because the inflammation in your abdominal cavity is decreasing. As the pressure around your organs and the fluid retention in your gut starts to reduce, you'll begin to feel a lighter, less bloated sensation. Another clear sign that visceral fat is shrinking is the improvement in your breathing. Visceral fat can crowd the diaphragm, limiting lung expansion, especially when lying flat. As visceral fat begins to reduce, the diaphragm has more room to expand, making it easier to breathe. Many people report that they can take deeper, more comfortable breaths, particularly when they're lying down. This improvement in lung capacity is not related to fitness. It's a direct result of the visceral fat shrinking and allowing the organs more space. Along with these physical changes, one of the earliest metabolic signs that visceral fat is leaving is an improvement in fasting blood sugar levels. Many people notice that their morning blood sugar drops even without changing their diet. This happens because as visceral fat decreases, the fat stored in the liver, which plays a significant role in blood sugar regulation, starts to diminish. The liver, which produces glucose overnight, is no longer as overloaded with fat, leading to improved fasting blood sugar levels. Alongside this, triglyceride levels typically begin to fall before changes in LDL cholesterol occur. This is another clear sign that your body is responding to fasting in a positive way, even if the scale hasn't budged yet. As visceral fat continues to shrink, you may notice additional signs that are subtle but significant. One of these is reduced acid reflux. Visceral fat increases abdominal pressure, which can worsen acid reflux and heartburn. As the fat reduces, this pressure eases, and many people find that their reflux symptoms improve or disappear entirely. It's common for people to stop needing antacids without realizing why. Another important indicator of progress is the improvement in blood pressure. High visceral fat levels can cause vascular stiffness and activate the sympathetic nervous system, leading to higher blood pressure. But as inflammation decreases and insulin levels stabilize, blood vessels relax and blood pressure drops, often without any conscious effort on your part. There are also changes in posture that come with the reduction in visceral fat. People often report that they stand more upright, with less effort, and don't feel like their belly is pulling their spine forward. This shift happens because the visceral fat around your abdominal area is decreasing, which relieves pressure on the spine and improves your posture. This is a mechanical change, not something that requires motivation. You may notice that your clothes fit better around the waist, even though your arms and legs look the same. This is a positive change because visceral fat is the dangerous type of fat. It's the fat that increases your risk for heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic conditions. Losing this fat first is exactly what you want. Now, I know this can be confusing for many people. You might look at the scale and see no change in your weight. But what's happening internally is much more important. You are reducing the most dangerous form of fat, and that's a victory. However, this phase of fasting can be difficult because many people expect to see immediate weight loss. But that's not how the body works. The initial changes might not be visible right away, but internally, your body is healing. Your liver fat is decreasing. Insulin resistance is improving. Inflammatory markers are coming down. If you stay consistent during this phase, the visible fat loss will eventually follow. The problem is that many people quit before they've reached this phase of healing. They don't realize that their body is laying the groundwork for long-term health. If you stop too early, the visceral fat that's beginning to shrink can come back quickly. The key is to stay the course. Even when the scale isn't showing the results you expect, the deeper changes that are happening inside are just as important, if not more so than the visible ones. As fasting progresses, you may start to notice other strange but positive changes happening in your body. These might feel unusual or even alarming at first, but they are actually signs that your body is adapting at a cellular level. Let's talk about some of these strange signals, starting with changes in body temperature, breath, and digestion. These shifts can be unexpected, but they're actually a good indication that fasting is working its magic. One of the most common things people experience during fasting is feeling colder than usual. You might notice that your hands and feet feel cool, especially in the first few weeks. This happens because as insulin levels drop, your body starts to become more energy efficient. High insulin levels can cause vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels, which leads to water retention and a feeling of warmth. When insulin drops, the body conserves energy more efficiently and can make you feel cooler. This is a temporary effect and usually resolves as your metabolism adapts to the changes brought on by fasting. Along with changes in body temperature, another sign that fasting is working is a shift in your breath. Some people report that their breath starts to smell different, often describing it as metallic or even acetone-like. While this might seem like bad breath at first, it's actually a sign of ketosis. Ketosis is a metabolic state that occurs when your body begins burning fat for fuel. And one of the byproducts of this process is acetone. Acetone is released through your breath, and this is a clear sign that your body is tapping into fat stores for energy. It's not bad breath from poor hygiene. It's a metabolic process that signals fat burning is happening. You might also notice changes in your digestion during fasting. Bowel movements can become less frequent, smaller in size, or change in texture. For many people, this can be a bit concerning, but it's completely normal. When you eat less frequently and cut out processed foods, there's simply less waste to excrete. Additionally, fasting reduces gut inflammation, which can change your gut motility patterns. As long as there's no pain or distress involved, these digestive changes are a positive sign that your gut is healing. Along with these shifts in digestion, many people experience a temporary dip in exercise performance during the first few days or weeks of fasting. You might feel weaker or less able to push yourself during workouts, and that's perfectly normal. This happens because your muscles are transitioning from relying on glucose as their primary fuel source to burning fat instead. During this transition period, your performance might dip, but don't worry. Once your body fully adapts to fat utilization, you'll find that endurance and recovery improve, often beyond your baseline levels. Another surprising change that often accompanies fasting is a reduction in body odor. This may seem odd, but it's actually a positive sign. Chronic inflammation and insulin resistance affect sweat composition, leading to a stronger, more pungent body odor. As fasting helps reduce inflammation and insulin resistance, sweat composition changes and body odor diminishes. This might not be a drastic change, but it's one of the subtle signs that your body is improving its metabolic health. Emotional shifts are also common during fasting. Many people report experiencing emotional release where old feelings or emotions surface. For some, irritability may arise initially, but then it calms down. Fasting affects neurotransmitters and stress hormones in your body. And as insulin and inflammation decrease, your nervous system recalibrates. This process can feel like an emotional cleanse. But it's important to note that it's temporary and part of the adaptation process. Over time, your mood stabilizes as your body continues to heal. As your body adapts to fasting, you may also notice improvements in your skin. Skin clarity often improves, and many people report that their skin becomes less oily or more evenly toned. This happens because insulin and inflammation directly impact skin cell turnover and oil production. When these factors are stabilized through fasting, your skin improves. This is a clear signal that your body is making progress in balancing its hormonal systems and reducing inflammation. These changes, though subtle, are all signs that your body is healing. They're not always visible on the outside right away, but they're happening at a deep cellular level. The key is to stay patient and trust that these early signs of healing will eventually lead to more visible changes, including fat loss and improved overall health. The mistake many people make is interpreting these signals as problems when in fact they are positive signs that fasting is working. Your body is adapting, and this adaptation is crucial for long-term health. The most important thing to remember is that fasting isn't about instant results or dramatic changes right off the bat. It's a process, and the early signs of fasting working might not be visible in terms of weight loss or outward appearance. But inside your body, your insulin levels are stabilizing, your brain is getting clearer, your gut is healing, and your metabolism is becoming more efficient. These are all foundational shifts that set the stage for lasting changes in your body. Now, let's talk about the individual differences in how people experience fasting. Not everyone will go through the process in the same way, and that's something important to understand. Everyone's body is unique, and while some people might experience dramatic shifts early on, others might notice more subtle changes. Understanding this variability is essential so that you don't get discouraged by comparing your progress to someone else's. People who have significant insulin resistance, fatty liver, or high levels of visceral fat often notice dramatic changes early in their fasting journey. Their hunger shifts quickly, they experience clearer mental focus, and bloating reduces rapidly. This is because their baseline metabolic dysfunction was more pronounced. When insulin starts to drop, the changes feel more noticeable because the contrast is so significant. For these individuals, fasting can seem like an instant fix because their bodies are adjusting to a major shift in metabolism. On the other hand, those who are metabolically healthier may not notice immediate dramatic changes. They may not feel as significant a difference in hunger or energy levels because their insulin signaling was already relatively stable. That doesn't mean fasting isn't working for them. It just means there was less metabolic dysfunction to correct. They may experience smaller, more gradual improvements, but that doesn't mean the process isn't working. It's simply a sign that their body was already in a more balanced state to begin with. People who've experienced long-standing stress issues might also notice slower progress. Chronic stress elevates cortisol levels, and high cortisol can blunt some of fasting's benefits. Individuals with high stress may feel emotionally unsettled at the start of their fasting journey before they start seeing the benefits. It's crucial for these individuals to focus on stress reduction, sleep quality, and light exposure, as these factors play just as important a role in the fasting process as food timing. Age also plays a role in how people experience fasting. Older individuals might take longer to adapt to fasting, but they often see profound benefits once they do. Their mitochondrial function may improve more slowly, but the reduction in inflammation can be dramatic. This shows that even if the changes are not as immediate, fasting can have powerful effects on health as we age. The key is to be patient and consistent through the adaptation process. Women, too, may experience hormonal fluctuations early on, especially if they are fasting aggressively. Fasting affects insulin, which in turn interacts with estrogen and progesterone. Temporary changes in the menstrual cycle can occur during the early stages of fasting, but these usually stabilize as metabolic health improves. However, overly aggressive fasting can disrupt hormonal balance if stress levels are high. So, it's important to approach fasting in a way that aligns with your body's needs. One of the most misunderstood aspects of fasting is the potential for temporary weight gain in the early stages. Some people retain water initially as their hormones adjust. Insulin and cortisol changes can affect sodium handling, which leads to water retention. But this is not fat gain, and it typically resolves as your hormonal rhythms stabilize. Weight on the scale is not always the best indicator of success, especially in the first few weeks. The real measure of progress comes from the internal healing that's happening at the cellular level. Another common issue is fatigue during the first week or two of fasting. This is not a sign of starvation. It's simply your body learning to switch from burning glucose to burning fat. During this transition, energy levels might dip, but once fat-burning enzymes upregulate, your energy levels will stabilize and even improve. The key takeaway is that fasting is not about pushing yourself to the limit or forcing rapid weight loss. It's about consistency and allowing your body to adapt at its own pace. It's also essential to support fasting with nutrient-dense meals when you do eat. Breaking your fast with processed foods or high-sugar meals will spike your insulin levels, which can cancel out some of the benefits of fasting. Meals should be protein-rich, fiber-packed, and anti-inflammatory. This helps stabilize insulin levels after the fast and trains your body to trust the fasting rhythm. Hydration also plays a significant role during fasting, as water alone is often not enough. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium are crucial for nerve function, blood pressure regulation, and overall energy. The timing of exercise is another consideration during fasting. Gentle movement, like walking, supports fat oxidation during fasting. However, intense workouts early on in the fasting process can increase cortisol levels and slow down progress. Once your body has adapted to fasting, exercise performance will naturally improve. The most important thing is to listen to your body and adjust your approach based on how you feel. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is assuming that discomfort means they're not fasting correctly or that they should push through it. Discomfort does not equal healing. The real signs of progress are consistency, hormonal stability, and calmness. Fasting works best when it lowers insulin levels without increasing stress hormones. That's when you'll see visceral fat shrink, gut health improve, and your metabolic flexibility return. When fasting is truly working, it should no longer feel like a struggle. The real sign of success is when fasting becomes normal eating with long breaks. It should feel natural, not restrictive. If fasting feels increasingly stressful or exhausting, then something is out of balance, and it's important to ease off. Healing doesn't require suffering. The goal of fasting is not just weight loss, it's metabolic freedom. It's the ability to access stored energy without fear, to eat without inflammation, and to live without constant hunger. The 8 signs we discussed earlier, calm hunger, mental clarity, reduced bloating, fading cravings, better sleep, steady energy, waist changes, and emotional stability, are not just side effects of fasting. They are milestones that show your body is adapting to a new, healthier metabolic state. When you start recognizing these signs, you'll know that fasting is no longer something you're just trying, it's something that's working.